Hey everybody, it's Belinda, your favorite human resource professional. How can you talk about working with someone difficult without sounding negative? So I'm going to repeat the question. How can you talk about working with someone difficult without sounding negative? When you are interviewing, you should already have a set of stories, if you will, that you already know about yourself that the employer, the HR person may ask you. One of those things is, can you tell me about a time where some negative event? You should already have a story in mind instead of trying to piece it together at the interview. Remember, at the interview, you want to be prepared already. So you want to be prepared for all these type questions. So when you're telling the story, I always tell people, paint the picture. You paint the picture. Paint the picture for the HR professional. So paint the picture. When they ask you to tell me how you handled a negative event, you can paint the picture. It's not necessarily that you're sounding negative, you're telling the story. So you always want to tell a story. If they're asking about something negative, you want the story to end on a positive light. If it's true. If it's not true, don't lie. But you always want the story to end on a positive light. So even if you are starting off with something negative in the story, end it with something positive. End it that you learned how to do something different that you wouldn't do it again, or how you got along better with your coworkers, or whatever the negative story they're asking you. End it on a positive note. If asked the question, tell me about a time when you did more than what was on your job description, what do I say if I wasn't allowed to go outside of my job duties? So I'm going to read the question again. If you're asked the question to tell me about a time when you did more than what your job description asked, what do you say if you were never allowed to go outside of your job description? So that's a good question. And how you want to answer that is, you want to answer within your job description. Did you do anything spectacular within your job description? Did you meet your timeline sooner? Did you meet your quota faster? Did you exceed your sales expectations or requirements? That's within your job description, but you excelled at it, or you took it to the next level. So you can do a lot of great things within your job description, but you just have to do it, and you have to be able to tell that story. So if where you're working now, they don't let you do anything outside of what it says on your job description, the things that are in your job description, are you doing those well? Are you exceeding that? Because when they ask you, tell me about the time you did more is just met. More is just required. Where did you excel? And that's how you can answer that question if you're not allowed to do anything outside of your job description. And speaking on that, I want to make sure that I explain this clearly. A lot of people expect their employer to provide their job development. They expect their employer to say, hey, you've been here 5 years. Do you want to try to learn how to do something else? And that's incorrect. That expectation is incorrect, and it's false. I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. It is your expectation, yours, to make sure that you are getting the development, the career development, the opportunities. You want to voice them. You want to say, hey, I'm interested in doing that. Hey, I would like to learn how to do something new. You should go to your employer or your boss or your supervisor and tell them that. I worked with a lady, and I think her position at the time the title was a mentor. So she helped train new people to come in. And we were at a meeting one day, and she came up to me and she said, I want to be a supervisor. Because her title wasn't a supervisor. She didn't supervise anybody, but she did train. She said, I want to be a supervisor. So I was like, okay. And she said, I'm the HR person. She said, I did this at my last job. I supervised people, and I want to do that here. I enjoy training, but I also want to supervise. Now, by her doing that, by her going on that limb, to say, hey, I want to be a supervisor. The next time we had a supervisor position open, I immediately thought of her. Immediately, because she brought it to my attention. That's something that she's interested in. Sometimes people don't know, your HR person don't know, sometimes your boss don't know that you want to do something different or you want to do something more if you don't bring it up. So that's why I say it's your responsibility. So she came to me. Now, did the next week I said, oh, she'd be perfect for a supervisor position? Of course not. Because the next week we didn't have a supervisor position. But when one came up, I thought of her. Now, she didn't just get the position because she raised her hand and said, I'm interested. She had an interview, etc. But she was now on the radar of someone who wants to be a leader. She raised her hand and said, I want to be a leader. If that is something that you want to do, you need to raise your hand with your employers and say, with your boss, with your supervisor, and say, hey, I want to do more. It's your responsibility, yours. Don't sit back and wait for your supervisor to say that, because sometimes, here's the thing, especially from being a supervisor, being in HR, even being a business owner, that I'm looking at my plate, and sometimes my plate is full. It's hard for me to look over and see, oh, such and such plate seems empty or light. Maybe she'd like to do something else. I need such and such to say, hey, I got a light load here this week, this month. I've met all my duties or job descriptions, and I want to do more. So again, if you're interested in moving up, moving around, learning something different, learning something more at the job that you're at, the company that you're in, please raise your hand and say, hey, I'm interested. Now, with that being said, don't expect quick results and don't get frustrated because it hasn't happened quickly. Sometimes you may have to raise your hand again. Sometimes you have to go back and say, hey, remember 4 months ago, I told you that I'm interested in a leadership position? I'm still interested. Now, let me give you another example of another example. So there's a young man that I'm the HR person. He has applied for several positions to move up. Several. He never got them. Every time I tell him, this is what you need to do to improve. This is what you need to do to improve so you can get those positions. When a new position comes up, he applies. Like clockwork, I already know he's going to apply. And like clockwork, he does not get the position because he's made no improvements since the last time. So if you raise your hand and say, I'm interested in a position, and let's say you have to interview for it and maybe you don't get it, and you could ask, why didn't I get it? What can I do to make sure I get it next time? Again, that's your responsibility to say that. No one else's. Your responsibility to ask that. When they tell you, when they give you that feedback, you need to improve your time management skills. These positions require excellent time management skills, and you are constantly late on your work. He still applies. He doesn't get the position because he has not applied the feedback that he was given to be able to get those positions. So when you raise your hand, I want to do something different, and you don't get it maybe the first time, ask why, ask for feedback, ask what you can do to improve, and make sure you improve on those. I can't say that enough. I can't stress that enough. A lot of people put way too much pressure and responsibility on the employer, on your supervisor, to make sure that you get your career and personal development, and that is not your supervisor's or your employer's responsibility. It is yours.